Again then guys, and welcome to another special Projects Replica build, and today we're going for a much slower, a much calmer replica build than what we'd usually do. We often do extreme performance vehicles or higher grade models of existing high performance cars. This time though we're doing, yes, a higher performance model, but of a vehicle which, even in higher performance form, isn't exactly the kind of vehicle that would worry a Ferrari, for instance, anytime soon. Now, we are replicating the upmarket version of the classic Fiat 500, as of course you'll have seen from the title, and as far as the visuals, we have made some changes. They're not hugely noticeable, but they are there nonetheless. So we'll go first of all to the visual tuning garage for that, then over to the mechanical tuning garage, of course, and finally out to a racetrack. So as far as the visuals on this particular replica, we've gone for the Type A body kit. Basically what that does is of course removes the chrome bumpers from the front and rear, and also adds a very subtle but there nonetheless carbon fibre chin splitter. Now you can opt to have that in body colour, but that doesn't really look that much like the original 695 SS, so I opted for the carbon bumper. As far as the rims, I've gone for inch up 1. And then for the particular wheels that I've gone for, they're these Enkei RC T2 rims, which aren't exactly the same as the actual car's wheels, but at the same time look fairly similar to them. And as far as the colour of the body of the car at least, I've painted the wheels a fairly clean looking white, like a Scotia white for instance from the older Mitsubishi Evo, the Evo 1 or 2 I think it is if I remember correctly. And for the body, we've actually gone for a colour called Sarajevo White, which comes also, interestingly, from Mitsubishi, and that comes from the 1983 1800 GSR Lancer, which is actually a really great looking white. It's got kind of a yellowish cream undertone to it, almost like a pearlescent colour, actually, and it looks really good on this car. It gives the car a lot of tone to the shapes in the bodywork, and also looks fairly similar to the classic colour that, or one of the classic colours at least, that the car was available in. So that's it overall as far as the visual look. Now let's of course go over to the mechanical tuning garage. Now this build, probably not too surprisingly, is not designed for racing. It's not PP relevant, it doesn't need to be rounded off to say 300 PP or even 295, even though that's not far off. Now you can build this in a way that is rounded off to say 295, 300 or even more if you wanted it to, but I wouldn't really recommend it because it's not an overly quick car. It is the sportier model, but this is still a replica of a real car, and as it happens the real car, though quicker, still isn't really quick enough to be really competitive in the game at this PP level. So I'd recommend leaving this as more of a fun tune than a competition tune. Now I've gone for sport soft tyres, which is kind of overkill in a car this slow, but still. We've left the brakes stock, because of course it is a production vehicle, you don't want it to feel too good. As far as suspension, we've got the ride height on 110, front and rear. Springs I've increased to 375 and 325. The dampers and anti-roll we've got on 2. Because again, like with the brakes, you want the car to feel authentic. You want a little bit of body roll, a little bit of softness to the suspension so it feels like a classic sports model. We've got neutral camber and tow. We'll come back to the gearbox in just a second. Like with the brakes, I've left the clutch and flywheel standard. As far as the diff, as always, you could change it up if you want to, but I've opted for the lowest initial torque, highest acceleration and braking, and the turn-in on this car is superb. So you don't really need to change the diff, but obviously if it suits you then go right ahead. As far as power, we do have an oil change on this one. I've gone for stage 2 engine tuning and the Sports Cat, and then as far as the weight, you want to add 50 kilos, and that brings us up to the exact power of 38 horsepower and weight of 570 kilos of the real 695 SS, and I've opted to put that ballast just 4% towards the rear, though you don't have to do that. And finally for the gearbox, we are running the real ratios of the actual car, and you want an auto setting of 56 miles per hour. I can't recall if you need to do a gearbox flip on this or not, so you may have to, but I can't be certain on that. As far as the individual gears, we've got 3273, 2067, 1517, 1232 and 897, and then you want a final drive of 4720. So that's it overall for the Replica build. Now let's take it out to a racetrack to see what kind of performance this Replica can give you. Now, of course, with 38 horsepower, this car isn't exactly going to break records. That being said, it's really fun to drive. This car has such good handling that you can easily maintain really high cornering speeds in proportion to its straight line performance. Now, in a straight line, you're only looking at around 70-80 miles per hour flat out, so it's not a speed machine by any means. But in real life, I would love to experience what this car would feel like, because it must feel a whole lot quicker than the standard Fiat 500 of the time, and these are ultra rare cars these days. So if you do decide to use this build to replicate the 695 SS, which was essentially like a top hot hatch equivalent of the day, then obviously I hope you find it fun, first and foremost, and it's not necessarily, as I said, a competition build, though if you want to try your hand at racing it, feel free. But that's it overall for this particular build. If you'd like to request other builds or just keep up with tunes as soon as they're released, you can do that down below, of course. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.